Another game abandoned by its creators before it even had a chance to shine. It's a shame, and we're going to be diving right into it today on World of Warcraft Wednesday. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's Wednesday, and y'all know we're going to be diving into The Addiction. Now, we are a week out from Gamescom 2025, where the next expansion for World of Warcraft will allegedly be announced. Midnight. Wife and I are, well, to be charitable, we're not even on the fence at this point. We've largely checked out, and we're just waiting on confirmation of our suspicions here in the week, and then we'll see what the status of our subscriptions will be. That is not what we're going to talk about today. No, today's show, we're going to dive into a game that I barely knew existed, and I mean barely. Wife asked me about it. She was like, "What about that WoW Minis game?" And then I remembered the one single figure I'd found down at Rinks in a tub of 50-cent action figures and went, this here will be a nice learning experience for us all. So here we go. Now, there was once upon a time, back in November 2008, a miniatures game released by Upper Deck Entertainment, same folks behind the WoW TCG. And there was a deluxe edition released a month later. Development had begun back in 2006, so yeah, it took them 2 years to bring this thing to life. The minis are 40 millimeter scale. A standard tabletop gaming minis, well, they vary, but the standard tends to lean towards either 28 millimeter with a growing push for 32 millimeters. So these 40 millimeter ones are big. I found that out when I tried to use my big axe wielding Draenei chick as a mini and went, dang, she way too big. Maybe use her as a boss NPC or something, like an Eridar, but I digress. They produced a number of terrain pieces to simulate battle in various settings and scenarios based on World of Warcraft 2. You can have a game of one-on-one, you can have party on party, or you can have party versus monsters. And the game kept the three factions aspect alive with, Horde, Alliance, Unallied monsters. No surprise there. Just like the TCG, they were planning on raid sets, with Raid on Onyxia leading the pack. Sadly, as Blizz shifted focus to esports, they canceled the license with Upper Deck and the game was kaput, along with the TCG. Now, you can certainly be forgiven for never having heard of this game. There were only two sets produced, a core set consisting of 70 figures and an expansion, Spoils of War, consisting of 51 figures. You can see they kept the naming convention of the TCG here. They obviously planned on developing both properties, parallel, the TCG and the minis. And that would have been pretty exciting because there was a lot of cross-pollination between the two. You had, with the minis packs, you had cards that would be released that would affect the TCG game. And also both had loot cards that you could use in the MMO. So it all tied, it was a nice little symbiotic relationship there for a while. Now, moving back to the details. As stated previously, the core set consisted of the Basic Edition and the Deluxe Edition. Basic Edition came when you bought one of those packs. It contained 4 fixed minis and had half a dozen dice, little D10s, and you had red ones for Horde and blue for Alliance. You had character cards that detailed, what the little minis did, what their stats were. You had customizable action bar cards. More on those later. They had half a dozen bases for the minis. They had a two-sided map. The deluxe ones were nice and heavy cardstock, while the others were very slim, flimsy paper. Got a lot of criticism of those on reviews I read online, the few I could find. It had a rule book and it had a checklist of all the minis in the core set. The deluxe edition was a bit more with a pair of additional minis, so you had 6 instead of 4. You had specific maps set in Ashenvale, Tanaris, and Winterspring, and like I said, they had the card stock. These were the good ones. And it had a loot card, as mentioned previously, for the WoW TCG Drums of War expansion, so there's the overlap. The booster packs for this netted you 3 minis, and it seems like online they were going for, back in the day, they were going $15. So you're talking $5 a mini. Obviously, they are not worth that these days. So, but glancing at online prices, it seems like the individual minis are usually below $5 a piece. They're usually about $2, $3. They're cheap. But you can find some out there that are upwards of 15 to $20 a piece, and I suspect those must be the chase rares. Sealed products are so dang expensive, they're not worth considering, at least for this old hillbilly's budget. Like, we're triple digits minimum, man. It's pricey. But as far as the quality of the minis contained therein, yeah, they're all right. They're not nightmare fuel, but neither would I put them on par with today's breathtaking offering. So there's that. I mean, you jump onto Etsy and you can get somebody 3D printing something really, really amazing. You can build it on Hero Forge and you can have them printed out and it looks amazing. Whereas these were, I mean, they're back from the early 2000s, so the quality is and the game was just getting started, so there's that too. But gameplay was a bit of a mystery for I mean, I searched and I hunted, but every scanned copy of the actual core rulebook seems to have evaporated into the ether. And if y'all can indulge me for just a moment, this is precisely what I mean when I say get your physical media. Digital disappears and is real good at that. So one wonders what all has vanished into the void of digital only content for lack of a physical copy to prove it existed. And this, you can find rule books for, yeah, I could find a rule book for my 1960s toaster oven online. There it is. Can I find a rule book for this minis game from the early 2000s? No, I cannot. I guess it'd be late 2000. You know what I mean. But yeah, I mean, and if it weren't for the two or three enthusiasts I encountered after page of Google searches, I wouldn't have any idea the rules at all on this. It vanished that hard. It was just poof, gone. So get your physical media. Now, literally, the only information I could dig up on the rules, how this game plays, etc., were forum posts of folks talking about the game. It seems like the game deferred a good deal from traditional mini games like 40K and such. Instead of building a team based on a preset number of points, instead you would grab three minis. You made a note of their point values, and they had point values, and your opponent did the same. Now, the points didn't need to match, so you might have a trio of weaklings while your opponent comes stomping out with giants. I don't think I like that, but hey, the one guy that was a real enthusiast that I read the review of, he loved it. As was described online, your minis would fight using pre-colored dice, the red for the horde, blue for the lines. And if your team was lower value, you'd get more points for winning a skirmish, and you'd have a lower point threshold to earn to win the overall match. I suppose it made more sense when you played it, but again, I'm not sure I'm sold on the system. It sounds a bit like trying to take out a dragon with a kobold, but I digress. There's also a system of keeping track of a clock that I tried my best to interpret, but it just sounded convoluted and contrived. So I'll mention it in passing and that it doesn't sound like I'd be much fan of it in practice. Apparently, it had a range. It went to 10, with numbers 1 through 10, and some things would reset on the 5, and some things would reset on the 10, and then the clock itself would reset, which makes me wonder, it's like, why didn't you just do round to round? And, instead of saying this ability resets on a 5, you say it resets in 5 turns or something. Yeah, maybe, like I said, maybe it makes sense when you play the game. I don't know. Like, full disclosure, I didn't play this game. Couldn't even find an example of play, so there's that. That's how gone this thing is. But as for attacks, you had your melee and you had your range, just like the video game. Some attacks were quick and weak, others big and wind up kind of deal. Armor was used to resist melee attacks naturally, while resistances was used against magic, just like the MMO. And you had hit points, just like every other game. Each character came with a pair of what's called action bar cards, ABCs. These were special attacks and such that were not tied to that character, so you could swap them to other minis. And these are what is typically missing when you find these cheap WoW minis on eBay and such as the cards. And the cards are really what pushed the game into territory where it became collectible and customizable. These could be specific to a race or class too, just like the TCG. Hitting the cards with the right mini is really where I feel the game probably shines. Another thing was that none of the minis ever died when reaching hit points. No, just like the MMO, they spawned back at the spirit healer after a couple turns. I got a good chuckle reading about that. As you know, I've spent some time running back to my corpse from the spirit healer, just putting that out there. Further, glancing online, there are a number of folks that still play this game, even though it's long since discontinued. Not many know about it, but the people that do and still play it speak very highly of it. So I wanted to take a moment and put the spotlight on this forgotten little mini game abandoned far too soon by a company that's priorities really need a long look over. There was demand, and there still is demand, especially now, but there hasn't been supply for almost a decade. It's sad, really. However, I refuse to end this on a down note. In spite of the game being shifted to the bin by Blizzard, there's no reason it needs to be shifted to the bin by the world at large. So I would say when y'all are out there hitting the flea markets and the yard sales, as I love to do, be on the lookout for these little buddies. Grab some off eBay. Who knows, you might find yourself exactly that minis game that you've been hunting for. Anywho, that's about all I got for today, folks. Thank you, one and all, for stopping in, giving me a moment of your time. I appreciate you. I hope I entertained you and inspired you to get out there and roll some dice, do something fun, read a comic, watch a movie, put in a cartoon, make some memories, and as always, have a good one.